there and welcome to Bruxelles Je t'aime, Euronews' weekly talk show about European politics. On Brussels, my love, we take a look at some European stories under discussion of late. Check what's at stake for you and for Europe. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us. Coming up this week, the EU post-COVID recovery fund of €723 billion is in full swing. So far, all 27 countries have been able to dig into the pot, but some have had funds blocked and others are struggling to spend it properly. With so much money at stake in the first fund of its kind, we're asking if this money is being spent where it should and if the checks are stringent enough. And this week, the defence industry gathered here in Brussels to discuss the future of the European arms sector. With war back on European soil, conversations about beefing up European defence spending have sharpened, and the EU even plans to free up EU funds for the use of arms production. We discuss how much it could cost for the continent to be war ready and the role of the EU auditors in checking if that money is used wisely. To talk about these topics and much more, I'm delighted to be joined here in our studio by Tony Murphy, the President of the European Court of Auditors. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Maeve.
Vlad George, the Romanian MEP from the Renew Europe group.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Great to see you. Also a member of the Budget Committee over in the European Parliament. So you're well placed. And so is Lisa Wideman, investigative journalist at Follow the Money. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to you all for being with us and for yourself for coming the whole way from Luxembourg here to Brussels to tell us more about the European Court of Auditors really and its role, because of course we know it's one of the 7 EU institutions. Your role is to manage the money, but tell us exactly what you do.
Yes, Maeve, thanks again for the opportunity to explain that, because as you quite rightly say, we're one of the 7 EU institutions, but unfortunately we're not as well known as we should be probably. I think, you know, we have a body of work which is used by certain stakeholders and there's a certain audience who know about us, but I think the general public don't know enough about the work we do. We're basically there to ensure accountability and transparency. We're trying to ensure that the taxpayer can trust that their money has been spent in accordance with the rules in the first instance. But secondly, actually, that the objectives of the different policy areas are being achieved, which obviously has an impact then on their daily lives.
And that is the question, does the taxpayer trust in the money that's being spent?
I think on average the polls say no, right? But I think it's very important that the Court of Auditors is there, because it's one of the few institutions that are really working as a watchdog together, for instance, with the EU Ombudsman and checking if the money is spent well. I think most of the reports say there's always a lot of work to be done still, but yeah, it's really important for the trust of the people in the European Union.
And of course, Vlad, the Court of Auditors doesn't have any special powers really to sanction.
No, it's and they work together, and from what I know, they work very well with the EPPO, with the European Public Prosecutor's Office. But how can we talk about trust when we have rogue countries in the EU, when we don't have all the countries being members of the framework of the Public Prosecutor's Office? So that means that someone is afraid of the prosecutors. Why would you be afraid of the prosecutors? Well, usually if you have something to hide, and when we're talking about billions and billions of euros, we can surely understand what they want to hide. So trust doesn't go well with the fact that you don't want to have auditors, and they're doing, by the way, a very good job, or prosecutors checking on the way you spend the European money.
But are your hands tied sometimes due to the fact that you don't have enough powers? And just tell us what kind of areas you look into.
Well, I think what's important to stress is that we are independent. I mean, we're completely independent from the other institutions. We have roughly 1,000 staff. You know, we cover the EU budget across all the 27 member states. Vlad makes a point about fraud. Fraud is only one small aspect that we would look at. It's not our primary role. As he pointed out, EPO and OLAF are the EU bodies who are responsible in the first instance for fraud detection. However, as auditors, we always have to have an open mind that when we're looking at specific transactions, if there's a hint of fraud, let's say, we would basically stop then and forward it to the relevant bodies, because we don't have the proper skills to ensure that any later investigation is compromised in some way.
And we'd love to hear about those flaws, but first just give our viewers a bit of a picture of where you actually look into. I was taking a look at your figures from 2021 on 142.8 billion of EU budget. Top up there is natural resources and the environment, then cohesion and values, single market, European public administration. Talk us a little bit through these figures, Tony Murphy, if you will, and also the biggest concerns, because of course, Lisa, you mentioned those concerns earlier.
Well, as you see, we have a number of different areas that you had on your screen there, and we basically have arranged a court around those. We have different chambers which follow those different policy areas. So, I mean, the cohesion and the agriculture funds are basically 80 to 90% of the total EU budget spend, and they're managed basically under shared management. So it's a joint responsibility between the Commission and the Member States. So here we are looking at the whole control framework to make sure that the money, as I say, is being spent in accordance with the prescribed rules. Sometimes they're very complex, and this is where some of the problems arise. Let's say that for beneficiaries, it can be difficult to fully comply. And that's why I would stress again that we're not always talking about fraud, because sometimes fraud is intentional, whereas sometimes just the sheer complexity and difficulty of complying with rules, people make, innocent mistakes, let's say.
Are they innocent, Lisa? I mean, you're from Follow the Money. You've been looking into these mistakes that people have been made. Any examples you can give us?
Well, there is still a lot of fraud, also with the cohesion funds and with I think EPO. Every week we see new press reports about fraud being there. But it's also true that the rules are very, very complicated, especially, of course, when you're a small company. Then it's hard to always comply with the rules. What I really like with the Court of Auditors, that they've shifted from just checking the bills, right? Is it according to the rules, to also seeing, did the money hit home? Was there impact? Did the sustainable targets, were they reached? And I think you are doing that more and more.
It's about, I would imagine it's around 50-50. I mean, under the treaty, we have an obligation to do the financial audit. That's our main role, actually. But as auditors, generally, the audit, profession has developed over the years, where we're more looking at performance audits, value for money. So I would say the split is about 50-50. We issued 29 of those reports, reviews last year. So around 30 we do a year, which cover all the different policy areas that you mentioned there, Ian Maeve. So from agriculture to defence to wherever it might be.
And Vlad, of course, back home in Romania, in your country, I mean, EU cohesion funds have helped pull Romania and bring it up to perhaps in line with other
Definitely.
Are they working on the ground? Are they being absorbed well by the government?
They're not being absorbed that well, but the funds definitely work. So Romania is a totally different country than before we got into the European Union. No one can say different. But when we're talking now about inefficiency, so that's what I got from what you said. So yes, you can be inefficient when you do an investment that doesn't work or maybe less useful. But the amount of fraud in actual numbers, in the percentage, yes, we could talk about that. But in actual numbers, figures, we're talking about billions. We're looking at the public prosecutor's office, who's showing files of billions and billions of euros. That's huge money. Of course, we're talking about a huge budget. Again, the percentage maybe doesn't look that big, but the actual figures are astonishing. So we need to look more into that, and that's why we need to build better institutions. And that's why I'm constantly fighting in the parliament. And I must say that not everyone agrees that we need stronger auditor's office, stronger prosecutor's office. Every time we need to fight, I need to fight with many of my colleagues in different political groups to get resources for the people who are checking the way we're spending the money.
How would you like the auditor's office to become stronger? In what sense?
So they need more people, for sure.
They are getting more people, because now, of course, with the Recovery Fund, you have another task at hand, the EU Recovery Fund. And let's just explain to our viewers what that EU Recovery Fund is. The Next Generation Fund, it was created after COVID, and it's up to 723 billion euros in total, 338 billions of funds in grants and 385 billions of funds in loans. So, of course, yeah, it's like, wow, this unique fund that's never been used before, that you as well at the Court of Auditors will have to monitor. I mean, will it be a success story, do you think?
Well, I think it's a bit early to say whether it will be a success story or not. For sure, it's a completely different delivery mechanism. So I think we should, keep an open eye to see how it develops. What I would say, and what we can say so far, is that, the take-up has been quite slow, I would say. I mean, we're talking about 20% so far, given that it was an emergency response instrument, let's say.
COVID is gone.
Yeah, so the 20% includes pre-financing of 57 billion. So that, of 153 billion, which has been paid so far, 57 was pre-financing, which was basically given as soon as your plan was approved. So I think, we still have a long way to go in terms of the actual expenditure. And for us as auditors, which, we have tried to explain, is that it's a totally different mechanism from the EU budget normal expenditure, because there's no relation to costs anymore.
It's a totally different mechanism. And also, as you said, COVID is gone. Lockdowns have gone. And of course, we're in new times in Europe. Times have changed. Our economies have changed in the last few years for reasons we don't need to mention. And Italy, the ministers as well of the government of Giorgia Meloni have saying that it will be inefficient, that they cannot absorb these funds.
Yeah, and it has been a risk from the start, of course, that they have to meet so many targets, so many milestones. And also the parliaments have still to be, they agreed when they made the plans how to spend the money. But there will be new parliaments and new thoughts about pension reforms, etc. So it's really very interesting what's going to happen in the next few years.
Well, I think that's very true. I mean, that they have the environment when the plans were being designed is not the same as now. There are opportunities to change them in some shape or form, but the problem for us as auditors is there was an initial cost assigned to do a certain amount of reforms or investments, and if we start changing them, how do we do it? Because there was no price tag basically attached to each of these measures, so it's difficult to see what each of them is actually worth in the overall context of the total budget.
And especially, Vlad, because a lot of the dreams of the Commission right now are to go green very fast, go digital very fast, and a majority of these funds are focused as well on these areas. But studies that you've done in the past at the European Court of Auditors said that a lot of the spending on climate action was not as, quote, high as reported. So, I mean, this will be also a challenge for countries, Vlad.
Yeah, well, let's address the elephant in the room, and the word is reforms. And it's a political issue. So the countries, many of the governments changed from when we had the initial agreement, and now they need to implement. They got the advance payments, for which they didn't need to do anything, but now they need to deliver as governments those reforms in changing the systems of their countries for the good, for the better. But they don't want to do it, mainly for political reasons. And this is a major setback, because when you say that you're going to do something to get some money, and you don't do that something, of course everything will get blocked. And it's not about getting rid of COVID in the pandemic. It's about the fact that you don't work on your word. You are not trustfully. So yeah.
Well, I think that the aim of the Commission through this facility was to, as you say, to implement reforms which have not been implemented for a long time through the normal European semester process, and the money was a carrot to do this in a way. So I think that's the background to it, and that's why if you look at many of the plans, it's the reforms which are front loaded and the investments come later.
And also point out to our viewers that a lot of that money has to be paid back as well, right? As of
But how?
28. But how? Magic money in the future. But we will come back to that topic. What I want to discuss as well, of course, is the transparency around the data that we're hearing as well on the use of these funds and the misuse of funds. And there's one man who's been looking into this issue very, very carefully. He's a Polish man based in Warsaw. He's the co-lead of Open Spending Coalition. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but his name is Krzysztof Izdebski. And he's a little bit worried. Take a listen.
The aim, I think, of the European Commission, if we talk about the single market of mostly everything, we should also have a single market of transparency to be able to effectively check how the money are being spent in terms of the recovery and resilience fund and preparing us for a better future. But the real important thing is that if the data are being transparent and also open more to the public and investigative and any journalists in media, we would know much more about irregularities and corruption.
So there, Lisa, this idea of a single market of transparency, any reactions there?
Yeah, I work together a lot with Christoph. We work together with 20 journalists from all member states to find out where does the money end up. But the big thing was we realized that there wasn't any database to see who are the final beneficiaries of the recovery fund. So we bounced on the doors of the Commission and the Parliament and the Council for years to say, come on, it's so much money. You have to know in whose pockets it ends up. And now they are finally trying to give more transparency to it. Final recipients should be published by now in this year. But still, it's really hard to process that data to really understand who are the biggest beneficiaries, where are they from. So it's not the transparency that I think is important to have real accountability.
Tony?
I think it has improved a little bit because of the fact that now they have to publish the top 100. Originally, there was no plan to publish
They are
any.
publishing it.
So they are going to publish it. I mean, it's completely different to the normal EU budget where it's very transparent and you can see who the beneficiaries are in all the different member states. And I would say one big difference in this facility, as you said, the way it's been delivered, is that it's really being self-policed by the member states. An awful lot of responsibility has been put on the member states, so like self-declarations, for instance, that all EU rules and national rules have been complied with. And this is where we see a problem. We issued a report recently where we said there's an assurance gap, an accountability gap, and this is what we're talking about, because under the normal EU budget spend, you have a complete control structure where there's a procurement, state aid rules are checked systematically, whereas this won't be the case to the same level, at least for this facility.
Big concern there, Vlad, no?
Yes, definitely. And we need a one-stop shop for transparency. So every single euro that we spend from the taxpayers' money needs to be traceable. You need to see from where it went to the actual final beneficiary. So no excuses, no exceptions on that, definitely. This recovery facility was initially an emergency plan. Okay, the emergency has passed. Now we need to treat it as every other single taxpayers' euro. So we need to see everything. Again, there should be no exception on this. I'm sure the Parliament will always support this. For sure, I will always support something like this.
And this emergency mode, I mean, we've been for the last decade here in Europe in this kind of crisis mode, modelling from one to the other, and it's something as well, I suppose, that you're trying to adapt to as well.
Yeah, obviously, our role is, we're also trying to contribute to how the Commission and other bodies are reacting to these crises. I mean, that's our role, which is kind of ex post in a way. And we're also trying to look maybe in the future about the preparation for these crises. I mean, we've seen good examples across other member states where they're looking at how prepared the government are for particular crises in particular areas. So I think it's in the area which, as an auditor, we will be forced to look at in a more coherent way going forward.
And this week there was lots of talk about Hungary and whether or not they should even get access to their funds. Lisa, is this a story you were watching?
We are also always following it. There's always fun to be made out of that, yeah.
And how do you think this will end? I mean, people, of course, over in Hungary, they want the money, but...
I think they also want a strong rule of law, so hopefully in the end it all ends up together.
And Vlad, this week we saw as well debates on whether or not Hungary should even have their EU presidency. Do you have a stance on that?
Well, we're talking about the money today, and I must say that everyone needs to understand that the European Union is not an ATM machine. You don't just punch in some digits and then you get the money and that's it and forget about it. No, the EU is about values. It's about mutual respect. And you need to respect those values in order to be part of it and to get the actual money. If you don't do that, don't expect anything from the ATM. This is my message to Orban's government.
I know you can't talk politics, but would you agree with that? The EU is not just an ATM machine?
I agree. That's why I said there's always conditionality attached to any funds that you draw down, whether it's complex eligibility rules or whatever. So I would agree that it's not. It shouldn't be just a free for all. I mean, that in a way, I think the initial reaction was from the Commission was that these would be sort of treated as national funds, this facility, that it would be national funds. But then through the whole, when the regulation was being drawn up, there was the sort of proviso that, it had to respect the EU and national rules, which sort of then went against the fact that it could be totally considered national funding, which is like a budget support, what you're saying. Then it is more like an ATM.
Okay. I'm afraid we will have to leave it there, but for more information on all those stories, you can check out our website. Thank you so much to our guests for your insights and your analysis on that. But don't go anywhere, because after the break, we will be following the money in another area, and that is EU defence. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon. Well, this week, a number of EU leaders met in Moldova, and on their way they went to Bratislava to discuss, among other things, European security and defence. Among them, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, not mincing his words when he said that Europe needs to focus on arms production and defence partnerships between EU member states. And it's something that Brussels also proposed back in May, using EU recovery funds and cohesion funds for ammunitions. There was a vote as well this week in the European Parliament. And of course that means, Tony Murphy, that European auditors, yourselves, will have to be ready for this change and to monitor spending in this pretty vast area.
Well, indeed, as you say, I think our role is linked to the EU budget spend. So to date, it hasn't been a high priority area for us, let's say. As you say, that may change or is changing, let's say. As you know, we already did a review, a preparatory action on, defence research, where basically we were looking to see, it was a precursor to the European Defence Fund, where they were looking at, how projects relating to, defence research and technology. It was only 90 million euros, and basically our overall conclusion was that there were some good outcomes from the projects which were selected, but nonetheless that there's a lack of a kind of an overall strategy going
we
forward.
Took a look at that report. We can take a look there. In fact, it said 90 million euro on defence research was only partially useful, and that the EU still lacks a long-term strategy on defence spending. Lisa, is this something you've been covering?
Well, yes, because it's very new. Spending on defence industry, it's a very new topic for the European Union, which was always like a peace.
Self-care.
Yes. So the overall big question is: are we going to go into the direction of a European army, European defence force? How would that look like? And I think those questions actually should be answered first before you start throwing money at it. And I think the way it's going now, it's a bit of the other way around.
And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of lobbyists or members of the arms industry were in town this week at the Defence Innovation meeting. Vlad, what is your take on all this?
Well, new times, new needs, new rules. And I'm definitely for made in Europe, made in Romania, any day of the week. So yes, we do need a common defense force, but until that, we need to build our armies, our member states' armies. We should use European money for that. Again, we should buy made in Europe, and the time is now. Well, look around us. What's happening? I think the answer is pretty obvious.
And that's why this week, Vlad, in the European Parliament, in the mini plenary, there was votes, in fact, on this so-called ASAP. Quite a catchy term there from the European Commission. It's the Ammunition Production Act, and the idea is to accelerate production capability. And we can take a listen to Ursula von der Leyen, that's the European Commission President. She was speaking earlier this month on this topic. Take a listen.
So this act will support the ramp up and the speed up of the manufacturing of ammunition in Europe. It will combine leaner regulation with swifter permitting procedure. It's all about speed, 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 and scaling up now the production of ammunition because Ukraine needs it now.
It's all about speed. I don't know if the word speed and the EU really go hand in hand.
Well, as I said, they at least did the pilot action. I mean, the European Defence Fund is quite a substantial amount of money. It's just over 5 billion euros for the 21-27 period. So this is why I'm saying for us, I mean, it will become a more increasing part of our audit portfolio with the increase in the spend. We already have a second audit, apart from the one we previously mentioned on military mobility. So you can already see that it's coming into our range. You know what I mean? And I think it will be going forward.
So will you be looking then for more powers in order to be able to audit?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I don't know when we get into things like security clearance and things like that. Obviously, that will be a different issue. But we already have some issues like that. I mean, we audit some, aid to third external states and stuff like that. So we already have some people who are classified to do certain types of work like that. So it probably would mean broadening the range of people who would need this type of access. So we will have to see.
And just from your perspective, I mean, thinking of European citizens, do you think that they're okay with this spending in this area, even though Vlad, of course, said times are changing?
As long as the policy is good and proper, then it's okay. But speed sounds all great, but not if the rules that are underlaying are not really, allow a lot of fraud or just opportunism. Like the arms industry is obviously very interested in this European funding, but we have to see how will they profit, and is it we can't just spend lots of money to the weapon industry without good consideration of where it ends up.
I think this is where there has been a big change. I mean, normally for many major EU policies, there would be a previous impact assessment done. Mm-hmm. So obviously, in this crisis sort of type management, this type of framework doesn't exist anymore. So you run the risk. You need to have a sort of a joint up thinking, if you like, as you're saying, that it's properly thought out and properly planned.
Good job for you.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. But the aggressors don't wait for your impact assessment and stuff like that. So that's why ASAP, as soon as possible. I think it's a great title for this because we need it yesterday. Yeah. Our defense stocks, I would say, they're pretty much depleted in all our countries because of one war in Ukraine. Of course, accountability, like I said before, but we need to move fast because reality doesn't wait for us to do our usual papers, our usual Brussels dance, that we need rockets, we need bullets. So.
No, I fully agree. That's what I was saying. But this goes back to what we're talking about preparedness for different crises, I mean, and not just a reaction. I mean,
we should have done it before, definitely.
But are we lacking someone with vision here then that's not thinking more to the future, to all the crises that could come, especially geographically where we're based here in Europe compared to the US?
I'm just a journalist. I'm not going to talk vision. No.
Let me answer it as quickly as I can. I'm from Romania. As the eastern part of Europe know the Russians and the Russian threat very well. We've been under their threat for 50 years. They've imposed communism on us. And we knew it. We told our Western partners that this is going to come eventually. We need to be prepared. But some people said, no, business as usual with Russia. Buying gas, buying oil. They didn't listen. And this is why we weren't prepared for it. Russia knew it, and they attacked.
Well, I mean, there is a foresight unit in the Commission who are looking at these forward or future trends. So, I mean, I presume these type of things come under their radar.
Okay, and let's see how they continue on with that. A lot on their plate, but thank you so much. I'm afraid that is all we have time for on that topic. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for being with us here in Brussels in our studio. Thank you to you as well. And thank you for watching. If you'd like to reach out, our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com, and you can also find us on social media. But we'll see you soon here on Euronews and euronews.com. Hello there and welcome to Bruxelles Je t'aime, Euronews' weekly talk show about European politics. Now, one story that caught our eye this week was EU countries ranking the highest in drinking. Among the 10 countries that drink the most alcohol in the whole world, 9 were here in Europe. That's according to the World Health Organization. A couple of those countries on top: Czechia, Latvia, Lithuania, Germany, Spain and Ireland. Have you seen that news? What do you think of it?
Well, I think apart from the interesting part of this topic, I think that on a serious way of talking about it, I think we definitely need to look more into people's habits and people's health and less into companies' profits, because there are some people who are profiting from our bad habits.
Very briefly, Tony Murphy?
Yeah, I think I can only agree with Vlad. I think everything in moderation would be the message, I think. If we can't stop it, so I think, we should be realistic and everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation. Well, to hear if locals here in Brussels feel that it's a fair assessment, if they even knew about this, and to find out more about their drinking habits, our Ellie Liberté took to the terraces.
No, I didn't know at all. I thought it was the Americans. I didn't know it was European people, so... I think it's cool because we drink a lot because we have fun a lot and we do parties a lot. That's what we say, especially in Belgium.
No, I'm not surprised because, yes, I think in Belgium people drink a lot of beer.
I drink every week, I would say, when I'm with my friends and when we go out. But for example, today I don't drink because it's like 3 in the afternoon, so I didn't start drinking yet.
I'd say maybe once a week. It depends also, I guess, when it's summer, you feel more like enjoying outside activities and seeing more friends.
Every day because I work in the bar. No, I just stopped because it's better for health. Yeah, I just choose to stop drinking like few months ago. I just feel better without alcohol.
It's a big problem in Europe. Alcohol is a big problem. You can enjoy it, but you can be ill, and then it's a real problem. It's a hard drug.
So you can enjoy it, but you can be ill. I think it summarises a little bit what you both said before, no, about everything in moderation. No, Lisa?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really missed my glass of wine when I was pregnant, though, so I'm happy to be back.
A lot of sparkling water, I'm sure you had.
Yeah.
But did you see as well, just last week in Ireland, they've started to put labels, warning labels, just like we have on cigarettes, to warn people about the risks that come with drinking alcohol. It's the only country, I believe, in the whole wide world. Tony Murphy?
Yeah, I did see it, yeah, and I think it's a good idea. Why not? I mean, as someone said there, I mean, it's a drug of sorts. I mean, so it's not treated like that. So I think it should be on an equal footing.
It's amazing how alcohol industry has escaped from labeling in general, like the ingredients, the like how many calories are in.
It's
this
all
is intake.
Yeah, but this is
it's all not there.
Yeah, but this is what they're going to put on the ingredients and the calories as well as sort of these not nice pictures about the cancer risks or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, as you say. I mean, the companies will always figure a way around. I mean, another big issue, as you may know, Maeve, is in Ireland you're not allowed to advertise, alcohol products. So what the big companies are doing now, they're advertising 0%. Products. So they're advertising with the brand names with the same. So I mean, it's a way of getting around it. So I think there's, no matter what you do, I think it's such a big value industry that
it's not about a beer or a glass of wine. It's about abuse.
Yeah.
It's about the publicity to have that abuse. And I think that's where we need to work with our citizens, because of course the companies will always want to make more money out of anything. But we need to work with our citizens to explain to them that we don't want to get their beer off the table, but everything needs to be, moderate. And if you're moderate, you're fine. But otherwise, you're going into addictions, and you need to treat it as an addiction.
And the minimum pricing following the introduction of it in Scotland. So I still think it remains to be seen the impact of that on consumption, let's say. So I think they are taking steps. I mean, I think in Ireland they're still very proud of the fact that they were the first on the smoking to ban smoking, etc. So I think...
I'm afraid that is all we have time for on that topic, but thank you so much for being with us. And thank you so much for watching. Do reach out to us here. Our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. All comments are welcome. You can also find us on social media, on Instagram and Twitter. See you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com.